Hey everybody, welcome to the video version of the Merchant Sales Podcast. Thank you for taking time to watch this episode. Let me tell you what we have in store for you today. We start off with an interview with Josh from Gorilla Technologies. And it's such an interesting interview because we talk so much on this podcast about this transition from really focusing on merchant services to focusing on technology. And that's exactly what Josh did, came into the industry a while back, several years ago, and then has made this shift and actually built a technology company around point of sale solutions for restaurants. So really interesting insights talking to him about that transition. Then we go to an insider's report where Patty shares some data from a recent report released by PaySafe that shares some information about how consumers are changing their preferences in terms of their method of payment with debit cards, contactless versus credit cards, cash, all these other things. So very interesting information there. And then I finish it up with a quick question from the field. An agent asked me this question, and this happens so often in the field, where the merchant doesn't want to give you a processing statement because they first want to see your rates. And they say, you show me your rates, I'm not giving you my statement. So I talk about how to navigate that and end up closing the sale. So we got a lot of great stuff. Let's go ahead and jump into that interview with Josh. I know you're going to love it.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
All right, everybody. I am here today. Patty and I are here with Josh Carper, who is Business Development Head over at Gorilla Technologies. How are you doing today, Josh?
Good.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. So
thanks for being here.
Yeah. So Josh and I are going to talk today about this kind of transition from a focus on merchant services to more of a focus on technology. And so Josh, the reason I designed, the kind of the questions the way I did is your story was so interesting to me, and kind of you have a very unique path, I think, in the industry. You started out the way a lot of them do, but I think it's a little bit unique the way it developed. So can you start off with that? Tell us about how you got into the industry and then kind of how you developed into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I started in the industry, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, just selling credit cards. So I finished school, got a corporate job. It was climbing the corporate ladder, and just it wasn't for me. So I got out, and the first thing I stepped into was selling credit cards. So I was out knocking on doors with no income, left my nice, salary and benefits, and had no income. So it was a little scary, but it all worked out. So I had some experience. I bartended and waited tables through high school and in college. So I knew about restaurants. I didn't, but so, that was why I kind of focused on that vertical. So I just went door to door. I would get lists of places that were opening, and just went around and called on places. And through that, I got kind of, it can get old after a while just talking about the numbers. I understood the numbers, and I understood how to sell a credit card account, had some moderate success with it. But I really enjoyed talking, because through that process, I had to sell POS to a certain extent if I wanted to get the credit card account. And here I am writing checks to, the Aldello reps, and buying data cap and different, gateway fees just to get the accounts. So sure. I started getting into, and I got into an iOS, which was probably one of the easier ones to step into in the POS market, and just started installing it. Right. It was more of so I started a different company for that, and it was more of a hobby than anything else. And so one thing led to another. People kept calling back and opening new locations and calling us. So it kind of developed into a company after a while.
So many things about that, what you just said are interesting. So when you first got into the industry, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're saying is you went after the restaurants because that was kind of your background. You'd had experience in that vertical, right?
Yeah. Well, and I quickly found that they're also profitable.
Yeah, there's another.
Yeah.
Because I was initially, I was just going, so I would go call in a restaurant, and they would most usually are within a mall or something. There's a nail salon, there's a retail store, there's something else there. So I would walk in and call on them. So I got at one point I had a chain of car washes, and what I found out is when I went outside my vertical, I made less money because I spent so much time figuring out,
Right.
and specifically the car washes, figuring out fleet cars and how to set those things up correctly. And I just, going after it, it just worked out better for me to go after a vertical and just stick within that vertical.
It's such a good point, because there's so much lost opportunity cost, when you're going after, you're trying to sell everybody and you're not very good at selling anybody.
Right.
You have a lot of lost opportunity costs. So then the other thing that's interesting to me though, is you talked about that transition of, you're focused on talking about savings and, I would imagine analyzing statements and things like that.
Sure.
What was it about that first kind of year or so in the business where you're like, I really, did you see the future of it? Like I need to be focusing more on POS. What was it that kind of made you make that shift that frankly, a lot of other agents are having a tough time making?
I mean, it was a natural shift because I just have a natural love of the technology and also I like kind of getting in there with the client and, I don't just sell it and leave. I like following up and seeing how things are going. But we all know now that we may have not known 7-8 years ago. Or quite clearly, or how tightly integrated processing and software was going to be. But now you have to be.
Right. Right.
So for me, it was just a natural transition, and I enjoyed it more. So I sold more. I was more successful with it.
Right.
Me going out and walking in and selling. Processing was a grind every day. And it was more of a love to go in and talk about the details of their business and how we might be able to help or solve problems.
One of the interesting things that I talk a lot about that I just would like to get your opinion about is, for me, my success out selling credit card processing and then specifically technology is that I actually really like business, like
Sure.
I really enjoy like going to a small business and you're like, what kind of marketing are you doing? What's operations like? How many employees do you have? How do you organize your shifts? How do you know what I mean? Like, I like business. I really like talking about it, reading about it. I'm like a QuickBooks certified professional, all that stuff. Do you feel like that, does that play a role into it? Whatever it is for you, like, is there that love of like, you just enjoy talking to them about their business? And so then the POS is kind of like more integrated into those processes?
Most definitely now more so than then. Now I have employees and a business to run. Back then I was just starting, so
Right.
it was theoretical. I didn't really quite understand what they went through on a daily basis. Now I understand.
Right.
So I do love, I like having those conversations with other business owners.
Right.
It just happens to be with restaurants, but I think we all share a common, there's a common challenges and issues that we face.
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. So you're selling credit card processing. Then you're like, okay, wait a second. I could sell technology. You're targeting restaurants. At
Yeah.
some point in that process, you realized there's a business here, not just a job. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start a technology company, walk me through that transition. What was it in your mind that was like, I think there's maybe more here?
Yeah. Well, whenever it was a full-time job and I was no longer doing sales, I was just answering my phone and email. So at that point I knew like we had something here and we needed to go after it. So I had a friend that had experience, was working for a chain of restaurants as an IT director. We partnered up and started to go after it. That's when we rebranded from the company I never expected to be anything to Gorilla Technologies.
Sure.
So,
Sure. And what's the timeline on that? How long ago, how long ago did you hire your first employee? And you know what I mean?
yeah, it took a while, man. Maybe it was just slow for me. I feel like I have other friends that have started similar businesses that have moved quicker, but it's been a grind. So I started JRL Systems in 2014, I think.
Okay.
And I did that more so as like a hobby. I didn't really push to grow. It just kind of naturally grew. And then we started Gorilla Technologies, I guess about 2 years later.
Okay. Right.
So it took about 2 years until I knew, all right, well, we got to,
Already doing
I
it
need
full time.
somebody else. I need help.
Right.
Um,
Right, right.
so, yeah, so I guess about 2 years before, we have more people. So, and we've slowly grown since.
I think it's so interesting. The best businesses tend to be started, like you just said, this idea of, we had so much demand that we didn't have the supply, and so
Yeah.
we're hiring people for the supply. And I think a lot of agents, they do it the other way. And so they go, oh, not much is happening. I'm not making very much money. I'm not very good at this. Maybe I should hire someone. It's like,
Mhm.
no, no. Like, you go be good at it. Right. And so I think there's that side of it. But, when you look at the momentum that you were able to build, so you got to the point where a lot of our listeners would love to be at, which is, I don't even have time to sell. I have so many clients. I have so much business. What do you attribute that momentum to and that success to, that you were able to get from starting from scratch in the industry to a point where you have more business than you knew what to do with?
Yeah. I think responsiveness, I think, was a big one. We're competing with larger companies that aren't quite as flexible or responsive. I've always been creative with solutions, especially when it comes to point of sale. When we partner as a dealer, the last thing the software developer wants is a new dealer coming back asking for dev requests constantly. They're constantly want a new feature or function to
Right.
deal with something that the restaurant wants. A lot of times what they think they want is something, it's not what they want. If we just sit
Right.
down and talk to them, sometimes the solution isn't even within the software. It might be an operational procedure on their part. So I think our success came from just being responsive and in front of them too. Most of our business is local. So
Sure.
the way I got most of my business was participating in leads groups, or I would drive by places until I found them and talk to them in person.
What about the specific technology, Josh? I'm just wondering, how did you go through the process of determining, what was the right POS system for you to be offering?
Yeah, so when Matt and I started Gorilla Technologies, we wanted to keep something that was feature rich enough that could replace something like, and I'll bust out name, Aloha or Micros or something like that. The
Right,
typical systems that people were on and been on for years out there,
right.
but move it to the cloud.
Okay.
So essentially we wanted it in the cloud, but the problem with cloud in 2014, 2015, is there just weren't many good
Right,
options. We would
right.
go, we would go to replace one of these larger systems, and they would have a list of features that we just couldn't meet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the biggest challenge. Um, but in a nutshell, it was really just moving restaurants to the cloud and more innovative technology, solutions for the.
Finding the solutions that would work in the cloud and serve
Right,
those
because many of
restaurants,
the
right?
cloud solutions that have been developed were developed not specifically for restaurants, and if they
Right.
were, they just didn't have enough features and functions to replace a
Mm-hmm.
just even small restaurant.
Sure. Just out of curiosity, Josh, where are you guys at now in terms of, is this technology that you're using now? Is this like you finally found some vendors that have what you want, or you've built out what you want?
Yeah.
Like,
So
your tech, or what's the deal there?
yeah, so we haven't developed. We've done some development.
Like, expand
And
some.
that was just a love as well, and a lot of YouTubing. So we
Sure.
have plugged, we've plugged some stuff into others, but largely we're a sales engine for software companies. So
Sure.
we have two main products right now that we're dealing, and both are cloud. So one is we were a dealer for a POS system called Imagine POS, which was then acquired by Spot On. That's our number one product currently.
Okay.
We've had great success with it, and they're phenomenal partners. And what we found, you fast forward to now, there's a lot of solutions for the merchants out there. There's not many solutions for dealers.
Right.
What I mean by that is there just aren't many good deals for dealers out there.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to start a company such as this, there's not many options.
Sure.
So as a merchant, there's a lot of places selling direct, such as Toast is probably the most common.
Right.
But there's no dealer model for those products.
Right. Of course. Yeah. They want to go. And it's interesting to me how it seems like that whole ISV marketplace to some extent feels like the idea of direct sales is like, especially direct sales, the model our industry has. They just feel like that's not a viable model. We're just going to go direct to the business. But the irony is, if you've ever actually competed with Toast locally, it's not that hard.
No,
Like,
not.
because they don't have a presence and they don't have a
Well, the
footprint.
most difficult thing is that they're probably in a contract. So
Right.
that's
Right.
what we found. But otherwise, they went out.
Yeah.
Most of them went out.
Sure.
Well, I think it goes to this whole concept that these technology companies are making amazing technology, and then they have no kind of process to show the merchant how to leverage it.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of these restaurant owners, it's like, here's Toast. It's amazing. It'll do anything you want. Go figure it out.
Right,
Yeah.
because they're technology guys and they don't think beyond the technology. They don't think in terms of the specific business needs.
Well, Toast has become this big company, and we had a meeting yesterday. So, and this restaurant owner's experience is common when we talk to them, is that, I mean, she's a medium size. She does good volume. She's a very profitable client for any of us looking for a processing account. But for Toast, she just has a rep assigned to her. Who knows how long that rep has been employed or whether they have any restaurant experience. So when she calls in, her specific issue was about KDS, kitchen displays, but he didn't have any idea how to help her, and he's trying to do it remotely.
Right.
So here you have a phenomenal merchant that we would gladly go out and take care of them in person.
Right.
Now is locked into this contract and having to deal over the phone with someone who, doesn't know how our business operates.
Are these contracts, I've actually, I've competed against Toast in terms of like somebody was considering them, but I've never done the switch over. Like when you see their contracts are, a barrier, what are we talking about? Is it because it's some liquidated damages thing, or is it like, what is it? Why is it so hard to get out of the contracts?
I don't know what algorithm or how they calculate it, but I believe essentially whatever profit they're going to make throughout the term of that, which is usually pretty large.
Liquidated damages is what, and it's like 20 grand or something to get out.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
I've heard 20, 15, 10. Yeah. So, and so, I mean, the one we met with yesterday, I believe had like 24, 23 months left.
Sure. Just so one last kind of off the wall question for you. I was just thinking about, I'm just wondering, have you guys ever experimented with, in situations like that where you can't flip the merchant, but they're having a terrible experience? Have you ever experimented with the concept of, going ahead and providing them with service, like just technical service on their current system, with the idea that in 2 years you're going to switch them, or is that not worth it? Is it like, no, we'll just wait and come back in 2 years when their contract's up?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done managed services for Aloha. I mean, we're not an Aloha dealer, but we understand how networks work and how to improve their system. And the thing about point of sale is it may take a little while to learn one, but once you know one in a specific platform, so a legacy type system, you can dial into another one pretty quickly.
Sure.
A lot of the cloud-based systems work very similar. So, we've done some managed services and just build on a monthly basis. We've also, especially with all the COVID stuff going on, we've all taken hits. We've been fortunate that we had some equipment on the shelves and we've had good partnerships. So we've actually given some systems away to people that need them. I mean, in my experience, it's always resulted in a net positive for us. Whenever if we're able to, we help somebody out, whether it's time or even hardware.
Right. Yeah, I think that's just so important, and I think a lot of agents, miss the boat on that. They're too focused on, it's like, well, I have to have the payment processing account today. Well, no, you don't actually. Like, why do you want the payment processing account? Well, because I want to make $150 a month. Okay.
Yeah.
So charge them $150 a month to help them with their system,
Yeah.
and then they're still going to be paying that in 2 years. And then you're going to get the other 150 a month when you get the processing.
Right.
So I was always a big believer in that. I'm like you, as far as I think we actually have very similar paths as far as the, starting the company and stuff, because for me, when I have my own local life, so I was very technology focused. And, what I realized is that these business owners had no idea what they were doing. And they were very much willing to pay me to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was willing to take the money. So it worked out great,
Yeah. We've tried to be careful. So one of the mistakes that we did make early on is we wanted to be an all-in-one resource. And you just have to be careful.
Yeah.
Because you get into too many things. We were doing menu builds, like printing the menus, logo design, Facebook and social media management, website design. I mean, what I have learned is we have partners now that we just kind of outsource that to, so that again, we can stay within our lane and be experts in that.
Right.
Okay. So I lied. I have one more question for you. So this is a very open-ended question, but, kind of coming back to the purpose of this particular podcast episode is this transition from a focus on merchant sales, merchant services sales, to a focus on technology, where obviously payment processing is still a piece of that. You guys have everything integrated, you still have that, but it's not the focus. For those agents and ISOs that are listening right now, that literally for the last 18 months, they've gotten up every day and said, I know that I need to make this shift, right? But they haven't yet. They're still just selling payment processing, and they don't really, do you have any one or two or three, like, what's a tip that you would give them to say, like, it's time to make the transition? What should they do? What's the tip that you could help them with?
I think that I would partner with someone, there's different personality type and whatever you lean towards. I think if you're more tech savvy and you enjoy that, then I would lean into it. If you are more into, making the sell and moving to the next account, then partner with somebody who will nurture your accounts behind you. So, and the thing about the way that the POS and a lot of these technology companies work in our specific verticals is they may have different reputations in different areas. So depending on what dealer is servicing them. So find somebody that has a solid reputation and partner with them. And you may take, it's worth it. So you may, there's only so much money to go around, right? So, or get creative with how everybody makes money, but you may make a little less. You may have to share a piece of that pie, but it's a pie you otherwise wouldn't have.
Well, yeah. And too, lifetime value is so crucial. It's something I wish our industry talked more about. It's like, well, I have this account that pays I make $100 a month on this account. Well, yeah, but that account has, a shelf life of about 30 months. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So your lifetime value on that account is $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, or you have this other account that's $50 a month, but the average shelf life there is 10 years.
Yeah.
So what do you want? Well, obviously lifetime value is better. So I think you got to be, smart about financially, not just, what's the monthly income, but how long is that monthly income going to last?
Right.
If you find a good technology partnership, these people are getting your POS systems. They're not going to switch that for a decade, probably.
Yeah, they're sticky for sure.
Yeah. So, Josh, great information. I know some of our listeners, I know you're not, you guys aren't a huge national company or anything, so not looking for all these big partnerships, but we may have some people interested in learning more about Gorilla Technologies and what you do. Where would you send them to learn more?
To our website. It's at www.gogorillatech.com. Or if you want more information, you feel welcome to email me directly, josh@gogorillatech.com.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much for your time today and your insight.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff.
Really good stuff. Thanks, Josh.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
Okay, so James, PaySafe does a lot of consumer research, some of which I've reported on in the past. This week, I'd like to offer some insights from a report that they just issued on how COVID-19 is affecting consumer payments.
Okay.
This is something we've talked about in the past, and some of these data points we've talked about, but it's really interesting to see, consumer research that sort of bears out some of this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And the survey itself was global. What I did is I broke out the numbers for the U.S. because I didn't really think the global stuff was that pertinent to our people.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's about 5 points. The first is that the surge in e-commerce that was brought on by stay-at-home orders is going to have long-term consequences. And, sort of bearing witness to that, 25% of consumers say they started shopping online for the first time since the pandemic began. That kind of surprised me, I have to say. I thought everybody was shopping
I didn't know.
online. Right? Exactly. That was my feeling. But that's a pretty significant share. And among the old pros like you and me, 42% say they're shopping online more, which I can attest to, and I know you can attest
Oh,
to.
for sure. Yep.
30.
Although I was already just about 100% online, so
I know. I remember we talked about that, and it's funny because I am so much online. People laugh at me, but we've talked about this in the past. I live out in the country, and I don't get in my car and go out every day, right?
Right.
So sometimes it's easier for me just to go on Amazon and order paper towels.
I always say I support every local business that has a website.
That's right.
So
That's right.
if I can buy stuff from you online, I will support you. But this is 2020. This is not this is not 2001. So if you
and the other thing, I know I was talking to a friend the other day. I went online. I was looking for, extra masks, right? And I wear glasses, as everybody knows, as you can see. And when you wear glasses, a mask can be a real pain in the butt because your glasses fog up.
Sure.
Well, I was tooling around online one day. I found this little vacuum cleaner shop in Kansas, of all places, that had retooled to make face masks for people who wear glasses.
Wow.
And I'm like, way to go, this is a small store, out in middle America. And I'm like, good on you. I'm going to buy face masks from you, right?
Love it.
Yeah, I love it. And it's like, I also just love the idea that somebody was quick enough on their feet to make that transition.
Oh, absolutely. To me, that, and that's business. And I think, I'll go off on just a little rant for a second because,
Sure.
To me, I get it. I know that these are really, really difficult times and a lot of businesses. I mean, if you're in the entertainment industry or something,
Wow. Right. Yeah.
I get it. And I'm not trying to minimize that, of course. But at the same time, if you're in business, and that includes those that are independent salespeople, if you're in business, then it's to some extent a game.
Mm-hmm.
And in any game, there's competition, which means there are winners and there are losers.
Right.
And if you are like, I'm really good at business. If you're really good at business, then that means you find those transition points.
Exactly.
You're
always thinking about it, right?
Always. And you're going to, you're going to make it happen. And ironically, it's times like these where, I'll, be really transparent, and I probably shouldn't share this on here, but, our company in the month of May was the most profitable month my company has ever had.
Wow.
And part of that was payroll protection program that we didn't need.
Right.
Right.
But what the heck?
Right. I'm not going to turn it down. But also a big part of it was, we rolled out this huge sales training push all over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because I recognize I'm a sales trainer. So that means now I had to cancel 3 paid consulting trips where I was going places and getting paid thousands of dollars to do an in-person event. That all got canceled.
Right.
So I could sit back and say, oh man, well, I just can't make good money this month. No. You know what?
Find another way.
You got to pivot. So I'm not trying to toot my own horn there. I'm just saying in business, that's what it means. Like when you're like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a businessman, I'm a businesswoman, if you really are, then that's what it means. It means that when things get tough, you know how to make a pivot and you know how to still make money because that's what business is all about.
That's what it's all about.
Sorry, now you can go back to your day.
And actually, that kind of goes to what I wanted to say next, which was PaySafe's comment on this e-commerce trend. And that is, businesses that recognize and capitalize on the surge, in demand for online products and services, and do so by offering convenient and efficient processes, are not going to only boost revenues in the short term, but they're going to position themselves long term, because whether it's this and a lot of people, are saying this will come back, the pandemic is going to have another surge, and, It doesn't matter. People are changing
Right.
and businesses need to change with them. And e-commerce is definitely an important part of that.
Yep, for sure.
So another thing, and this was interesting, credit cards do remain the preferred way to shop online with about 56%, which I thought was interesting, followed closely by debit cards at 50%. But consumers are open to alternatives. And nearly 2/3 said they had used a new to them online payment method for the first time during further pandemic shopping.
Really?
And digital wallets was one.
Okay.
Debit cards was another, because let's face it, most people like to use their credit cards online because of the protections.
Sure.
But the one I thought was interesting was eCash.
And
I'm not quite sure how that works, but I know how it used to work.
Okay.
It used to work that you could go in, there were some companies that would have these programs where you could go into like a 7-Eleven, hand them cash, and they would give you an e-voucher, which you could then use to pay for something online.
So kind of like a prepaid card almost.
Kind of like a prepaid card.
Interesting.
And
I wonder if that also includes things like cash back rewards type, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder.
Yeah, sure. Like my rewards money, right? Yeah.
Like a company's own kind of system, because I have to wonder, something like eCash or whatever, depending on how that's structured. I mean, is that something that you could use on any e-commerce website, or is that like a separate type of payment?
I think you have to have it as a separate type of payment for that e-commerce provider.
Right.
And again, I tried to do a little research on this, and it wasn't real clear to me.
Yeah.
That it was much different than the way it used to be, which means you still have to go hand your cash to somebody.
Right.
And then either get a card or authorization code or something like that.
Sure.
But anyway, I mean, it is interesting, the idea that people are like, okay, I'm going to be shopping more online. I need, to have some alternatives like I do when I shop in person.
Right.
Okay, the third point, 9 out of 10 consumers have changed how they prioritize what methods they choose for making payments. Now, since most of the shopping is being done online, it's probably come to little surprise that concerns about fraud and security are the most salient, right? They want a card that gives them fraud protection, and they want to make sure that their data is protected. For me, that means, I'll be honest, I like to use my Google account or my PayPal account, because I know they have my credit card, but maybe not that little merchant out in Kansas, right?
Sure.
So there's that. But also RANs include cost, obviously,
Right.
ease of use, and speed of completion. If you have to enter in, that's again goes to my PayPal or my Google account. If I have to enter in a lot of information, that's a pain in the butt, right?
Yep.
But if the information's all there, I'm going to use that. I think that's kind of like where digital wallets come into play as well.
Sure.
Number 4 is a really interesting one. Consumers are conflicted about cash, but it still remains central to spending plans. 47% said they would use cash even to make an online purchase if they could figure out how to do it. Which kind of goes to what you and I were just saying, right?
Yeah, right.
And 43% said they'd pay more online, they'd shop online if, cash was an option. But by the same token, they seem to be of two minds. There's still sort of that concern that, is cash really safe? Do I really want to be handing those bills and coins,
Right.
I have a little thing going on where, and you and I have talked about this in the past. I'm of a generation, I still carry cash.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I go to a store, particularly I'll use it when I go to get a sandwich or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell them to put the coins in the tip jar.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
That extra little bit of germs that you don't want to get.
Just don't want to touch that. You already got it. Just put it in your tip jar, right? Or in the McDonald's, you can, they have that little thing where you can put the money in to just throw it in that little thing for the Cancer Society, right?
Yeah.
It just sort of gives me a little bit more protection. I'll take that 5 back, but you can put those 3/4 in there, right?
Right.
So, and then the final point is something we've been talking about in the past, of course, and but it is nice to get this reinforced, is that contactless. Contactless this is the catalyst. This has been a catalyst
For sure.
for contactless adoption. 69%, nearly 7 out of 10, said contactless payments are the most convenient way, and they're even more convenient than cash.
What was that percentage again?
69.
Wow, really?
So 7 out of 10 people in the U.S. say contactless payments are more convenient than cash.
Wow.
That's really interesting. Now, that doesn't say that the 69% are actually acting on it,
Right.
but they're certainly thinking about it.
There though.
Yeah, I thought that was very telling.
Huh.
And it's interesting. I did a story that I just filed with the Green Sheet that's going to post, I guess, later this month on sort of changing payment habits. And I asked a couple of people, went out to a couple of processors, and Fiserv told me that contactless payments at its installed base of Clover terminals were up 13% from March through May.
Wow.
That's a significant increase for 2 months, 3 months maybe, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then just to sort of go along with that, that first stat, nearly 6 in 10, 59%, said they like the notion of contactless payments more now than they did a year ago. So I think that kind of goes to what we've been saying.
Yeah.
This is the catalyst.
Yeah, I think that it sounds like the minds have been changed. Now, if the habits will change, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. But I mean, I think, we've said this before. It's sort of like, in fact, actually, in my story, I had a quote from, I forget, it was somebody I think it was somebody at Visa who said, it's like muscle power, right? Like you build a muscle. And if you keep using contactless now, it just kind of gets reinforced.
Yeah, it's like that muscle memory where you're not going to forget about it.
You're not going to forget about it. I did try and I wasn't able. I was really interested in seeing if any of the people I talked to could break out contactless cards versus mobile devices. And they don't seem to be able to break that out. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen any data on that. That would be really interesting to see though.
Yeah. I even asked a couple of ISOs that I talked with, and they had stats that were very similar to Fiserv's.
Sure.
And they were all like, "No, we just don't have the capability to it's a contactless payment. That's all it is."
All right, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, they probably wouldn't even know actually because it would come through the same.
Right. Exactly. So,
yeah. Oh, good stuff, Patty. Very interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
All right, Patty. So here is our question for today's questions from the field. It comes from Eli. He asks, there is a common objection that I don't think you've ever spoken about. What do I do if I approach a merchant and I ask him for his statement and he says, you tell me your best rate. I'm not going to give out my statement. He says, is that a lost cause? Eli, it is definitely not a lost cause. In fact, I actually would call that a buyer sign. So, I would much rather somebody say, you tell me your rate, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. I'd much rather them say that than I'm not interested.
Right.
So that's actually a really good buyer sign. And so one thing I always, try to do in sales is I try to find ways that I can agree with the prospect. I look at it as, whatever the prospect is saying, if you look at it almost like kind of like a river that you're getting into and you want to go in this river, you can paddle upstream if you want.
Right.
That would be disagreeing with the merchant.
Right.
Or you can paddle downstream.
Mm-hmm.
As a general rule, you're going to do a little better paddling downstream, a little easier.
I've done a lot of canoeing. I always like the downstream part.
Yeah. So here's what I would do in a specific situation, Eli. So when the merchant says, basically you get to that point and you're like, hey, I'd love to do a cost analysis for you. Do you have a statement I can take a look at? And they say, well, I don't want to show you my statement. So you have to understand their mentality. That's the key. Why are they saying that? Well, the reason they're saying that is because they've had processors in the past where they've given them a statement and the processor always seems to come back with about $50 a month in savings. And so they're like, well, I don't know if they gave me the best rate or not. They just looked at my statement. They took it down a little bit. Okay. So what I do in that situation is I say, of course, that's totally fair. I would love to do that. So let me just clarify, Susan, what you're saying is if I can give you a written document with our best offer on it, you would then be willing to show me a statement so I can show you what that pricing would look like in terms of dollar savings when compared to your current pricing. Basically, if I'm willing to show you what I'm going to offer, you're saying
Right.
you'd reciprocate and allow me to take a look at the fee section of your statement. Is that right? So usually by agreeing to them, you're actually going to throw them off a little bit. They were probably expecting you to say, well, I have to see your statement first, you know?
Right. Sure.
So then you'd say, well, what rates do I show them? Well, here's the great part about it. It doesn't really matter that much because you're showing them the rates.
Right. You're not showing them the cost.
Right. They don't know what those rates mean. You know, you price them on Interchange Plus and you're like, well, here it is right here. You know, it's Interchange Plus, 30 basis points and 7 cents with a $9.95 PCI fee. And they're like, okay, like good. Now
Right.
statement.
Right.
So the good news is, here's where this path leads you when you're actually selling the merchant. So what you want to do is you want to give them a rate that's very competitive. I mean, for me, when I was selling, I actually had certain rates already predetermined based on the size, of the merchant, the volume of the merchant. So
Okay.
I knew I would price them at 40 and 8 if they were 10,000 or below. If they were 10,000 to 25,000, I usually priced them at 25 and 5. If they were, so I had all my levels. So I had these memorized. So if you kind of know generally how you would price, usually with experience, you're going to be able to look at a merchant and kind of tell where they're at, So you go on the safe side of that. And what you do is bring with you some pre-printed pricing sheets, that have this information on it. You could use something like getisoamp.com, which, I'm not biased at all. I just happen to own the company. But it's great for this. But you can print out some proposals, showing some examples and some pricing things. And then you have those ready and you hand it to them. So then what'll happen next is you say, okay, great. Well, I actually have it right here. Let me show you what it is. And you pull it out and say, okay, so let me show you this. So here's our best rate for your type of business. We would do interchange plus 40 basis points and 7 cents. Now, as far as the net effect of, the dollar amount, like I said, obviously we still need to see the statement, but now I'm not just like playing a game with you. I am going to price you at these rates. So with that in mind, do you have a statement handy or should I swing back by tomorrow to pick that up?
Yeah.
Use your alternate advance, get your statement. Then you're like, well, what if I get the statement and they're already priced lower than that? That's even better because now what you do is you come back and you say, wow, I cannot believe it. Your prices are so good right now. They're actually better than my best rate. So I might not be able to work with you, but here's what I'm going to do. If you could give me one day, let me talk to my, the manager or however you position it. Let me talk to my processing companies I work with. This is definitely below what they would normally do, but let me see if they'll make an exception, to work with you. And as long as I'm able to, if I do this and I go to bat for you and everything, as long as I'm able to save you some money on this, it sounds like you would prefer to work with a local small business owner like myself rather than one of these big companies, right? And they're like, sure. And then of course, now you can always lower it. So the interesting thing is if you price it and then you have to lower it, for them, it feels like they're getting this amazing price because it was your lowest rate.
Right. Right.
You have to be careful. Where this gets into trouble is when you go, oh, wow, look at how low those rates are. Well, I'll just drop my rates even lower. And they're like, wait a minute. I thought that was your lowest rate. So you have to be a little careful, but you can absolutely get around that and close the sale for sure.
Good stuff, James. Thanks.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.